You're listening to P&P Pals Tabletop Role-playing Radio Theatre. Today, we're taking a short break from the narrative that is unfolding in our typical sessions for a few reasons. First and foremost, we've been killing ourselves releasing a new episode every other Monday. Technically speaking, everyone that works on P&P Pals is an amateur. No one here has professional experience in writing, voice acting, or sound design. We're hobbyists, and we need a way to occasionally slow down our production schedule. We're doing this because it's fun to do, and we have to account for that. On the other hand, we still want to release something related to the ongoing campaign, or tabletop RPGs in general, every other Monday. In a sense, this is a great opportunity. There are some things that don't fit well in the compact radio show we're trying to make, so our idea is that occasionally we'll introduce short segments that let us talk about those things. That brings us to what we have for you today, a segment called Knowledge Domain, where we answer questions and share production details. For today's Knowledge Domain, one of our friends asked us a question about the end of each of our sessions. What's that outro all about? At the conclusion of every session, there's an outro composed of 3 parts. We summarize what we feel was the most significant event or theme, credit Mr. Walker R. Williams for composing the theme that bookends each show, and wrap up with our production description. When it was first written, we thought that it was all very self-explanatory. Now we see that's not necessarily the case when it comes to one line. P&P Pals is adapted from a 5th edition D&D play-by-post campaign and has been dramatized for your enjoyment. We didn't want to drag out something that was going to be a part of every episode, so we tried to pack as much information in that as possible. Maybe too much. Starting at the top, when we say that P&P Pals is adapted from a D&D 5e campaign, we mean that we are playing a tabletop role-playing game using the 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons rules. I, Audette, act as the Dungeon Master, presenting the world and the majority of the conflict in it. Rosma controls the player characters and he just messes up all my plans. He's the wrench, and he throws himself bodily into my works. Okay, earnestly now, he controls a limited set of characters that have to react to all the conflict I throw at them. Oh, that's something worth pointing out. While I provide the voice for Anise, Rosma is actually the one playing her and Retribution in the game. If that seems odd, hang on to that. We'll have more to say about that later. Anyway, we roll dice to determine crucial events, and there's never a point where one of us knows how the story is going to play out exactly. It's not just moment-to-moment attack rolls and skill checks either. Character attributes, entire random encounters, and a host of other elements have been shaped by the dice. So, although the show is scripted, its events are as much the result of rolls and collaborative storytelling as any other D&D game. Having what amounts to 3 sources of limited input on a story keeps things interesting. Moving on to the next part, play-by-post. Of the questions people have asked us so far, what is play-by-post has been asked most often. It's not anything special, it doesn't modify the core game. It's regular D&D, but instead of an hours-long gathering around a table, the story is passed back and forth over the internet, usually over a much longer period of time. Imagine a forum thread with a prompt that people respond to by quoting D&D rules. Does that make it sound fun?
I think it sounds fun.
Probably not a good sign. While play-by-post was originally conceived to let people play over long distances, before the internet got so speedy that you could just play in real time, it's also fun if you're more comfortable writing than talking, or if you like mulling over your actions. Despite its internet origins, it feels very old-fashioned, like exchanging physical letters to a pen pal. For us, we started this game in a Google Doc, sending characters and scenarios back and forth whenever we had some time, just a few times each week. We have a few other campaigns running with other people, but none of those featured the kind of adventure we want for Anise Retribution. Since it was just going to be the 2 of us following along with a mercenary company, playing by post was the best choice for us. It also gives Rosma all the time he needs to pore over the party's inventory spreadsheet. The hours he spends just tallying to check encumbrance.
Yes,
hey!
It is every bit as intense as it sounds, titillated traveler. My sheets are heavy things, each one like an ancient obelisk grown dense under the weight of time. Also like ancient obelisks, if your gaze falls directly upon these worn surfaces, you may go blind. One day, when one of us was taking notes on an earlier section, we started to clean it up a little.
After that, we realized it kind of looked like a script, so we polished it up a little more, turning it into a radio drama in honor of the dated pen pal style we were playing in. And now, at long last, dramatized for your enjoyment. At its most basic, this means we tidy up the results of the game, we add voices that would be hard to do consistently at the table, we add music and sound effects. More than that, though, after deciding we wanted to put this campaign on the internet, we knew that we wanted it to be a drama, in the more classical meaning. Let's play, unboxing, contour tutorial. We're pretty sure the exact type of show we want to make hasn't been codified on the internet by contemporary pop culture. For us, with the media we consume, the closest thing to what we want to make is a podcast, but that feels about as evocative of saying internet content. And dramatic podcast sounds stupid. Hence, radio theater, because audiobook with sound effects doesn't sound as fancy. We've both enjoyed D&D for a long time, a slight majority of our lives, in fact. Often we revisit old games, retelling stories of encounters from years past, but when those tales are told, most of the numbers are left in the past, at the table. The characters, though? The environments and challenges, twists of fate, large and small, they persist. There are several wonderful D&D podcasts around that we really enjoy. They're great at making you feel like you're at the table as the action is happening. The thought, or lack thereof, that goes into each decision, the suspense of every choice and role is compelling. But we wanted to make something a little different. We want to tell you the best version of what happened on our adventure, at the highest quality we can manage. As we go about making our posts into scripts, we focus on the story that emerges once everything is resolved, rather than the moment-to-moment specifics described by the game's mechanics. For example, this is why we don't announce the results of damage rolls or current hit points. We've got notes on all of that, but it's not something that we feel improves the show. Though we think that the mechanics are deeply interesting in their own right, we want to tell the story of the adventure we're on. How the events of each session play out is usually enough to give you an idea of the end results of the various rolls, checks, and saves. Maybe you're fine with all that getting cut out, but you could reasonably wonder, how heavily do we edit the proceedings for the sake of drama? For our distilling process, we use a few rough guidelines. Alterations should improve the narrative quality and make a better story. They shouldn't be completely inconceivable to someone that knows the rules for D&D 5e, and they shouldn't ever erase the consequences of a die roll. I've got some examples. The party encountered some giant centipedes. We were invested when we played it out, and the characters were mechanically rewarded with some experience points, but with the benefit of hindsight, it was uneventful and redundant. Retribution and Anise destroyed them exactly like the spiders they fought before. They didn't even take any damage. The encounter went from a paragraph to a sentence or so, and we're considering cutting that too. A different example, one where we added something new, would be the introduction of Absinthe and Janice to the party. After the girls were safe, there was a quick, highly utilitarian exchange. As a player, Rosma understandably wanted to know why I just introduced his budding mercenary company to a couple of children. Were they somehow self-sufficient? Are they a quest hook? Were they actually halflings working in cahoots with the bandits? In the original posts, they were questioned very directly about their skills and backgrounds. Rosma has DM'd far more than he's played, so he very consciously tries to avoid derailing the campaign by latching onto every character that's introduced. After we worked out that I was prepared for the kids to travel with his party, he reimagined how the characters would interact. We reworked that into a road trip style conversation to drive home the feeling of having traveled a long distance while delivering the same points of information about the new characters. Specifically, Retribution originally asked very simply if the girls could read, write, and do math. If we had kept it the same as it would have been a terse, out-of-place exchange that felt isolated from the characters that we're trying to portray and the world they live in. In the finished episode, we start with all the characters working together, and you can just see them reading, writing, and doing math, which is a much more organic way of working with a child. Imagine if those scenes played out like this instead.
Child?
Are you talking to me, lady?
Yes, I am talking to you. Can you read? Tell me now. I've got to turn this quest in by 3 p.m. before my dailies reset.
And Anyone who's played D&D can tell you that the narrative and interactions that happen at the table aren't without hiccups. In between conjuring these amazing adventures and stunning stories, the group is doing math, checking rules, and making bad puns about bears. I hope I've demonstrated that we're careful with the changes we make after the game has been played, and they're made to quiet those hiccups. That's all for today's Knowledge Domain. If you ever wondered what our outro was all about, I hope I cleared that up. Next time, Rosma will deliver a different segment he has in mind. After that, we should be moving on to Session 7. If you have a question you'd like answered, ask below or find our social media. Keep in mind, however, P&P Pals is a game and a narrative. There are some things we can't know ahead of time, and some things we're keeping secret until they come out as part of the story. The music for our intro was composed by Walker Williams. We have links to him and his work in the description. The show is produced by Precarious at Best and heard by you. See you around, curious traveler.